Welcome back to a very special Tying Tuesday, but not on a Tuesday. This should drop on the first Thursday in March. I'm Lincoln here at AvidMax, and we have a very special guest in the studio, Mr. Travis Hanson. We are going to do a talk and tie, kind of like a mini coffee break, if you will, and just peel apart the onion of what makes Travis Hanson fly tying, fly fishing, still water machine. And then he's going to tie one of his favorite bugs to tie and fish on camera, so we get a little bit of an elevated experience, who you are, what you do, and then tie a sick-ass bug for us.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for having me.
Heck yeah, brother. It was super cool seeing you at the Denver Fly Show. Very, very excited to have you in the studio. I love watching you craft up bugs, and so I'm very excited to just kind of get into, you know, the process behind your fly tying journey. So yeah, let's jump right in. What got you into fly tying?
So what got me into fly tying is I've been fly fishing for probably about 7 years, I think, before I started fly tying. I just got sick of paying $3, $4 a fly at a fly shop for them to start falling apart before I start catching fish. Or, you know, you get 3 or 4 fish into a fly and it starts falling apart. That was just kind of unacceptable to me. I had get asked a lot from my buddies, you know, to get into tying because of my design background with school. I used to go to school for industrial design. Always been into arts and crafts, always been drawing, sketching. So I had a lot of buddies tell me, you know, you should just try it one time. And so after about a year or two of them bugging me, I remember my dad telling me, he's like, hey, if you ever want to get into it, I have my old stuff down in the basement, you know, to get you started. So one day I hit him up, he dug out all his old stuff. And a week later, I was in here buying my first Renzetti from Kyle.
Oh, super dope.
So, yeah, it's been a ride. It's been really fun. I love the creativity behind it. I love being able to make flies that last, and just being able to put out something different than you can find in a fly shop.
Oh, for sure. You have so much control, right? The creative piece, I think, is where, like, for someone like me who's like, man, I didn't care. Care is not the right word. Like the cost of flies, because I knew talking to Kyle in the shop that it was going to cost more to tie my own flies in the beginning until I built up a collection of materials. But I think the creativity and the durability for me were very big. Like knowing that I could create something that's maybe more solid, maybe more fishable, and then the colors that I wanted to use. So that's super dope. I'm like really excited that it's same kind of creative piece for both of us, because you tie up some unbelievable bugs, like your rusty duck chironomid with the transition. Just kind of mind-blowing that you're peeling apart that onion and going, I can make this look even more real or even better by just adding one more layer or a different material.
Right.
What do you think's been the hardest thing for you to either figure out, master, or what's that one thing that you're just like, man, this is really hard to do when it comes to tying flies?
For me, you know, like building dubbing brushes, that's something I kind of struggle with. And learning, I think kind of everyone, when they first start, I think the hardest thing to learn, but is actually what I think is the easiest thing to do is actually the whip finish.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, especially if you're learning from YouTube, it's one of the hardest things to figure out. How are they twisting their hands? Then once you get it, it's super easy. And then another thing that I haven't quite delved into a whole bunch yet, I have messed around with it a little bit, super difficult, and it's probably one of the top tier, most difficult things in the fly tying world is probably going to be spinning deer hair. Those Jeff Rowley guys, you know, Joe Jackson, Jeff Rowley, all those guys, they do top-notch work, and I really give it to them because that stuff is not easy.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think has been the biggest thing that you've learned through fly tying that's either impacted your fly fishing or maybe just something in general? It doesn't have to be fly fishing related, but I know for me, through the journey of learning how to fly fish and then learning a little bit of fly tying, I'm definitely not like you guys. Y'all are on a totally different level, but I learned so much just in crafting bugs, right? The entomology piece. Is there something like that for you where through that journey of tying flies, you noticed like, man, this is elevated or changed fly fishing for me or something else in your life?
Yeah, definitely. I don't go as deep into the entomology stage as, some people.
Yeah.
Those guys like Tyler Boroff, I mean, they go down, to the T of the entomology phase. I just haven't had a chance to branch into it that far. But one thing that has really helped me out is starting to figure out, I didn't really notice all this until I started tying, but, when do things actively hatch in the water? What is a certain type of chironomid? What is a certain type of mayfly? I never really started to pay attention to any of that. I really didn't even know what a chironomid or a mayfly was until I started tying flies. I never really cared. I would just go to the fly shop. This looks good, this looks good, this looks good, right? Then you start tying flies and you're like, wait, what is this? Then you start seeing bugs on the water and you're like, what is this? Like, I know it's a stonefly, but this looks different than the other stonefly I saw. And, so I don't quite know the names of all that kind of stuff, but it's definitely interesting and sparks your interest, and it helps you get creative behind the vise to get something that's going to help produce in your waters that you're fishing. And that's one thing I love about tying flies is you get the control of, you can put it on a hook that suits your purpose. You can do colorways that suit different, scenarios that you're going to be fishing, runoff, clear water, whatever. You can kind of adapt to that. And you can control your weights, you know what I mean? So you have just a next level of control when you start tying your own flies. It's really fun, and then once you catch a fish on that first fly that you tie, you're gonna be hooked, so.
Oh yeah, it's a game changer. It's a game changer. So you're gonna tie remind me again what the fly is.
It's gonna be a variation on John Barr's Damsel nymph. So I love to fish this under an indicator. This one's a little bit more realistic. You can strip them in. However, I have one that's a little bit more quick and dirty for when I'm stripping it in. They don't have as much time to look at it. You can kind of get away with being a little less careful on that and tying up a whole bunch more before you go out. So.
Sweet action, dude. Well, let's tie up a John Barr's Damsel, man.
All right, let's get it.
We're back in the studio. Today we're going to tie up one of my favorite stillwater patterns for you, which is going to be variation on John Barr's Damsel nymph. I love fishing this under an indicator. You can also strip it in if you'd like. However, I do have one that's a little bit more down and dirty, takes a little bit less time if I am going to be stripping it in. This one's a little bit more realistic, so I love fishing it under an indicator. You can do this in different colors. This right here in the vise, I have a olive with olive mono eyes. Super realistic. I find a lot of these in my stillwater patterns that I fish, in the still waters that I fish. You can do them in an olive with a black eyes. Only thing you're doing here is changing out the color of the mono eyes. Looks a little bit more buggy. And I also find a lot of tan too. So you can do these in tan. I also do olive with red eyes. I just didn't bring one of those for you today. So the only thing you're changing on this is going to be the color of the marabou, the body of the dubbing, and the color of the legs. So let's go ahead and get one tied up for you guys. In the vise, I'm going to be putting in a size 14 TMC 2302 with the down eye. We're going to get started by adding some Semperfli A-Dot and pale olive. This is going to be the classic wax from Semperfli. When I start my thread, I'm going to go almost 2/3 of the way up the hook shank when I start my thread. And that's going to give me a nice indicator of where I want my legs to start and my abdomen to, my body to end. These damsels are pretty slender little bugs, so you want to be sure to not tie up too much bulk in your body. So you're going to go right down towards the bend of that hook. We're going to go in with our marabou. This is going to be some mini barred marabou from MFC in the color brown olive. Now when I'm taking this marabou, I'm just barely tying it in or taking it from the base here. So if you see that, I've already been using this feather quite a bit, so I'm not tying it in from the tips. I'm actually taking some feathers, I would say maybe about a pencil's worth, maybe a little bit less. So I'm going to take a small pinch here, make sure all the tips are straight towards each other, Just rip it off of your stem. I do like to tie on these tails a little bit longer than you're going to see on the naturals, and that's just to indicate and give this fly some movement. These things really swim around pretty aggressively in the water, so a longer tail actually kind of helps you out on this pattern. So I'm going to go just a little bit longer than a hook shanks. I'm going to go 1 soft pinch wrap, 2 soft pinch wraps. Make sure everything looks good. That's just a tad longer than I want it, so I'm going to hold these and just peel that in a little bit. Pretty sparse tail, but it's nice and long. Now I'm going to take this with my right index finger. I'm going to lift up and sneak a wrap of thread underneath that. What that's going to do is that's going to just kind of prep up that tail for us. You're going to lift this, work underneath, and wrap up to where we started the thread. I'm going to take this and lock it off. Really like these curved Dr. Slick Black Widow scissors, so I can get down on there nice and flush. Work back down towards where we tied on that tail. And go up towards where we're going to tie on our rib. For the rib, we have a piece of 4X tippet. We're going to be using a clear rib and a clear scud back for this to really let the body, the iced up body, do all the work for us. Wrap this down towards the bend. Come back up. You're going to grab your scud back. For this size, I like to use 1/8 inch clear scud back. Going to take my scissors and cut a nice little tie-in point. And I'm pulling this scud back just a little bit to help keep this slender on the way down. I want to try to make sure to keep that in the middle of the hook. Then you're going to leave your thread at the bend of the hook there where we tied on our tail. I kind of like to wrap this around this tension holder on my bobbin to keep it out of the way. We're going to go in with the body now. This body is going to be Spectra Ice Dubbing, color code 32. Do a little bit at a time. A little bit goes a long ways. We want to keep this pattern nice and slender. Nice tight dubbing noodle. Find with this classic wax thread, I don't really need to add any dubbing wax. Having a good pair of scissors is probably one of the better tools that you can invest in for fly tying. Having something that stays sharp, can cut synthetic materials good and clean, really goes a long ways. Okay, so now that we have that to where we want the body to end, we're gonna take our scud back, we're gonna fold this over the top, we're gonna lock it off with our thread with just a couple wraps. So keeping that in the middle there. Lift that up and move your thread in front. Now we're going to go through and counter wrap our rib up to the end of the body here.
maneuver that scud back as you go to keep it in the middle. I really like the clear segmentation that the tippet gives it versus using a wire. Go ahead and lock off your ribbing. You can use whatever ribbing you like. I have used wire before, but I always really tend to like this, this tippet as a ribbing. I'm gonna take this and wrap that back around and get it out of our way. We're gonna go in and add our legs. For the legs, we're gonna be using some olive mallard flank. What I've done is I've already cut this into a little notch right here. We're going to be tying that on right there. So I'm going to take this and lay this down right here, right where I cut that notch. You want to pinch it nice and firm from each side. You're going to go in with 1 loose wrap, 2 loose wraps, and then a locking wrap. And then we can kind of go in and move these legs to the side where we want them. You want them right in the middle of the body if you can. Move your thread in front and then come in here and cut those off. So now this is one of the tricky parts, or can be the tricky part. It's going to be adding the mono eyes. I sometimes, on a bigger pattern, if I tie this in a size 10, will like to substitute 50-pound mono for these eyes instead of these pre-made mono eyes from Wapsi. This is a size extra small. You really want to be sure to leave yourself room right here once we start getting towards the head, because we're going to bring this scud back over the top. And if you get too close to this scud, or to this down eye, after bringing the scud back over and doing the mono eyes, everything's going to come sliding right off. You're going to be pretty upset. So it's one of the reasons I was pretty intimidated by this pattern for a while. Actually has ended up being one of my favorites to tie and one of my favorites to fish. Really like tying it just because it looks really realistic when you're done. And I really like fishing it because the fish get super aggressive for damsels. So if this eye doesn't land quite where you want it to, one thing that you can do is you can slightly lift up on the tension from your bobbin and you can position those eyes to where you need them to be. Then you're going to come up and do some X-wraps, just like we're putting on dumbbell eyes. Making sure that they sit exactly where you want them as you secure them. So we're going to come do a couple X-wraps. Make sure everything is nice and straight. Hit it with 1 or 2 more X-wraps. Then we're actually going to come around like this, almost like we're tying in a parachute Adams, and move that to the front. Now I'm going to go in with the adhesive of your choice. Today I'm using Solarez Bone Dry. I'm just going to dab this right in between the eyes and let it soak into the thread to make sure those eyes aren't moving on us. Let that soak for just a second. You don't want to look at the UV light because it's bad for your eyes, especially if you tie a lot. Then we're going to go in with more of our dubbing, which is going to be the same dubbing we used for the body. Do a little bit tighter and a little bit sparser of a noodle on this one. So you don't want to build up too much bulk around this head. So we're just going to cover up all this in between the eyes. I think we can do just a pinch more.
It's pretty similar to John Barr's. Only thing I'm really doing different is changing out some materials, using some a little bit more modern materials. I'm gonna put a little bit of a shell back on it when we're done, and that's gonna be a wrap. So you're gonna move that right to the bin there. You see, we still have just a little bit of room, which is gonna be perfect. We're gonna take this scud back, bring it back over the head, and I'm gonna kind of bend this down over the eye, and I'm gonna use my thumbs to make sure I'm not getting too close to that down eye there. So you're gonna hit it with 1, 2, 3 wraps. You're gonna lift this forward and hit it with 3 wraps in front. Now you're gonna take this and you're gonna pull upwards. You don't wanna pull too much because this will sneak under your thread and it'll come undone. You wanna pull just enough to where it'll make a nice tie-off point. And we're gonna go in and we're gonna whip finish this twice. Add a little bit of UV. So first I'm gonna cover these thread wraps with the UVG, make sure that's not coming apart. When you hook that 24-inch cut bone that's just peel and drag off your line, you're going to be able to take this off and be able to fish it again. So my hook started coming out of my vise a little bit. Then we're going to go in with a thin scud back. This is going to be, or a thin shell back. This is going to be Solar as thin. The air bubbles out. You don't want none of those. That's way too much. It's okay. If you put too much, kind of take your finger, take a little bit off. Then we're going to go in with our bodkin, let that hang upside down, kind of build up a nice shell back. Cure that, don't look at it, it's not good for you. I'll say that a million times and I'll say it again and again. And there we go, John Barr's Damsel Nymph. Ready to go tear up some stillwater trout.